Hi friends, welcome to part 3 of our scalloped edge tutorial series. We are almost done with finishing our scalloped edge and I hope you've enjoyed the first couple of videos. So in this tutorial we will be assembling our bias binding onto our quilt. So it is a little bit slow going. I recommend going slower than you would with normal binding just to get nice points and nice edges on the curves, but the results are worth it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. I can't wait to see your scalloped edges. Please always tag me on Instagram at Liza Taylor Handmade so that I can see your wonderful makes. So thanks for following along and let's get into finishing our quilts. Okay, so I've got my quilt here and I've got my bias binding on the other side. So I always like to bind my quilts on the back and then fold it over to the front. But that's just personal preference and you are welcome to do whatever you prefer. So we are going to go ahead and start stitching our bias binding onto our quilt. So I'm going to leave about 10 inches or so and start at the top of one of the scallops. And you sew everything with a 1/4 inch seam. Get everything adjusted. I had to seam rip some of mine, my bias binding, so that's why it looks like that. Anyway, gonna tuck that in. Now we're just gonna go around each scallop. The name of the game is going slow and not pulling too much on your bias binding, but you also don't want excess slack. So let me show you what I mean. Just the bias binding likes to naturally curve, which is super nice. So you kind of just want to glide it around. And then if your machine has the setting where you can leave the needle down when you stop sewing, I would definitely recommend that, as it just keeps everything in place more. So when you get to the little corner, you're going to keep your needle in and we're going to pivot. So lift up your presser foot and pivot around. You kind of have to work it sometimes so you don't have any puckering. And there you go. You can just keep going on and following each curve. This is when bias binding is super useful compared to regular binding, because regular binding doesn't have as much movement in it and doesn't want to work well with curves sometimes. So I definitely recommend going the bias binding route. And I'm not pulling too hard at all, but I'm definitely not letting it have any slack. So we're about to come to another one of the little valleys. So I'm gonna keep my needle in, pivot, kind of work it a little bit. And I'll show you one more. Needle down and pivot. Okay, so I'm just going to continue doing this all around my quilt, every side, and I will meet you back up when we're ready to join our ends. Okay, so I've gone around the whole perimeter of my quilt And I've left this gap here so that I can join my binding edges. I just stopped about a couple centimeters past the last valley. So I'm gonna go ahead and join my two ends together. I'm just gonna do it the way I regularly do it with my regular binding. So I won't show that here because I do have a full video of it and I will link it below, but you can catch that in that video, and I will be right back once I have these joined. Okay, now that I have my ends joined, we are ready for the next step. So what we're going to do is grab your sharp fabric scissors, and at the valley of each scallop, we are going to cut a triangle, a little V out of it, and then we're also going to go right up to that stitch line. Be careful not to cut through it with a little straight line. So we are going to go and do that at every single one, all the way around our quilt. Try and flatten this one out. And then a straight line. So go ahead and do that around every single scallop, and I will meet you back here when we are ready to go to the front. Okay, now that we have finally finished trimming all of our corners, we are ready for the fun part, which is to flip your quilt over and sew it to the front. Now, if you'd like to hand stitch, this is the time you would do it. But I like to finish my binding, so that's what we're gonna do. So I am going to start just at the top of a scallop. Tuck in your loose threads. And it's similar to the back. Just gonna sew close to the edge. And then since we cut that slit in the corner, it just makes for a really nice, seamless finish. So I'm just continuing around the bends. The nice thing about bias binding, like I said, is it naturally wants to curve. And I'm just going to continue that all the way around, and once I'm done with that, I will show you the finished product. Okay, and now we are back to the start. So this is what it looks like all finished. Let me show you a zoomed out version. Okay, and here it is all finished. I love how it turned out, and as you can see, it's a lot easier than it seems. So I hope you guys liked this tutorial. I hope you love the scallop border, and I'll see you guys in my next video.